Are you having trouble getting sharp photos when you're shooting with slow shutter speeds? I'm going to show you how to deal with it on today's episode of
Ask David Bergman.
Hey there everybody, welcome back. Here I am as always answering your photography questions right here on Adorama TV. Listen, if you're not already a subscriber to the Adorama YouTube channel, please, right now when I'm shooting this in August of 2020, we are so close to hitting 1 million subscribers. If you're not a subscriber, please put us over the top. Make sure you hit that subscription button. Also use the little bell so you get notifications of all the new great photo content coming from myself and other photo hosts here just for you every week. All right, today's question is from Evan K. And he asks, I can never seem to get sharp images when shooting with a slow shutter speed, like a 1/30th of a second. What am I doing wrong? Evan, all right, listen, there are a few things that will cause your images to not be sharp. The first one, of course, is if the picture is just straight up out of focus, right? If your focus was wrong, that's a whole separate video. We'll do that another time. There's lots of great videos about focus. But you said you were shooting with a slow shutter speed. Now, there's really two things that would cause your images to not be sharp if you're shooting with a slow shutter speed. The first one is that your subject is actually moving too quickly, right? So what shutter speed is, just so we're all on the same page, is that there's a shutter curtain in your body, in the camera body, that opens and closes to expose the sensor. Now, there are other things that this affects exposure as well, of course, but as far as freezing action, you really want to make sure that the shutter's not open any longer than it really has to be to freeze the action. Now, how fast is fast enough to freeze action? It really just depends on what you're shooting, right? So if I was just moving back and forth like this, you don't need a real fast shutter speed. You could probably get away with 125th of a second to freeze that motion. But if I'm photographing a NASCAR race and cars flying by me, obviously that's not going to work. So you're going to need something like 2,000, 4,000, 8,000th of a second to really freeze that. So make sure you're shooting fast enough to freeze the particular action that you're shooting. But more than likely, what's also happening here is what we call camera shake. Now, that literally is when you're holding the camera and you're not on a tripod, there's motion that's caused by you holding that camera because it's just physically not possible to hold it for longer periods of time and not have motion when your subject is still, right? Separate from the issue with your subject moving. So, like, for example, every time when I photograph a concert, I like to go up in the upper deck in the rafters and make a nice wide shot of that whole scene, showing the stage and showing the fans. And I like to open up my exposure so I can really expose the fans and show all that light hitting them. I'm not as concerned about the stage at that point, but when I do that, I'm generally going to be at a very slow shutter speed, a 1/30th of a second, even a 15th of a second. So I have to be really still when I'm doing that. Now, yes, the people are moving a little bit, but in a wide shot, you really can't see it that much. So the rule of thumb when you're hand holding a camera is that you want the denomination of your shutter speed, the lower part of your shutter speed, to be bigger. You want that number to be bigger than your focal length. So if you're using, let's say, a 50mm lens, then you want to be shooting at least a 50th of a second. Realistically, you'd be shooting a 60th of a second because that's the shutter speed there. Or faster. If you're shooting with a longer lens, a 200mm, you want to be 200th of a second or 225th of a second. Now, I actually like to take that one step further. That was kind of the rule of thumb when we were shooting film. These days, with the high-resolution digital sensors that we have, I think you see motion in those images even more than you used to with film. So I would double that number. So with a 200mm lens, I'd want to be shooting probably at least 400th of a second, which, realistically, you'd shoot 500th of a second, 1,000th of a second. So that is really how fast you want to be when you're hand holding. And it makes sense that the longer the lens is, the higher you want your shutter speed. So, for example, if you're shooting a wide angle shot of, the sky and you tap the side of your camera, you're not really going to see that much motion. But if you were using a telescope, a super really long lens, and looking at Venus, and you tapped the side of that lens, Venus would be gone from the frame. So you can see that motion more the longer the lens you're using. So that's why that rule of thumb is in place. Now, we do have great modern cameras today that have image stabilization, both on the lens and in the body. And that will help with this problem, right? So if you're using a modern camera, the way they define it, they like to say it has 3, 4, 5, 8 stops of image stabilization. And theoretically, that will allow you to hand hold that much slower, right? So if you have to shoot something where you really have to handhold for a long period of time, image stabilization absolutely will help you. I think image stabilization is more useful in the video world where you're moving and showing all of that, and you want to have a nice stable shot. I think it definitely helps there. But in the circumstances where you're shooting with very slow shutter speeds, image stabilization will help. But there are also other things you can do physically to try to stabilize your camera as well, and you should do this whether you're using image stabilization or not. The first thing, and this drives me crazy, when you're shooting, you want to put your hand underneath your lens, right? The hand, usually in my case, my left hand, that's going to be bracing that lens. I see so many people holding it over the top like that, and that is just, first of all, it looks goofy, but besides that, it's just not stable, right? When you're holding it in that weird angle, your elbow's sticking out, it's just not stable. If you get your hand underneath it, you're really bracing that. You have now 2 points, right? You've got your one hand on the camera body and the other hand on the lens, and it's real stable. You can feel it immediately as soon as you do that. So please, if I see you doing that, I'm gonna tap your shoulder and make sure, tap your elbow, I should say, and get that hand underneath that lens. A few other things. When you are standing, you want to keep your elbows tight together up against your body and spread your feet apart a little bit, right? Those two things, your feet spread apart and your elbow together, really you're just tightening up your body and you're really stabilizing yourself so you're not sort of swaying around that easily, right? Also, if you're near something like a wall or something like that where you can lean up against it, that's going to help, obviously, right? You want to stabilize your body as much as possible. Also, little things like take slow, deep breaths, right? Very slow, almost Zen-like, right? And you want to take deep breaths, and even if you're really shooting at slow shutter speeds, you could shoot at the end of an exhale, right? So your body's not moving physically. The Olympic athletes that do the biathlon, right? That's one of the things where they ski really hard and they get their energy up and their heart is pounding, and then they have to stop and they have to actually shoot a target. And what they do is they're able to control their breath to slow down so that they can aim exactly where they want to. So work on that if you have to as well. Also, I prefer to use the viewfinder that's in the camera instead of the LCD because I can push that camera body up against my face. That extra point of contact really adds some stability. If you're holding it out in front of you, it's just not going to be as stable as if you can press it up against your body. If you're shooting video, something else you can do is the camera strap. Put the strap on and then hold the camera out as tight as you can. Make that strap go really taut and hold it out as far as you can because you're going to be using the LCD for that in most cases, not the viewfinder. So hold it out, and then by being tight like that, it really stabilizes it more, and you can pan back and forth. You can move and have nice fluid motion that way. Lastly, the other thing I like to do when I'm doing those high shots where I'm shooting those wide angle concert photos is, you know what? Some of them are just not going to be sharp. They're just not as low as you go. Everything that you try to do, there may be some frames that are not sharp. So don't chance it and just take one frame. Use that burst mode, right? Nobody's going to see the other frames. So if you have to shoot a burst of 20, 30, 40 frames and you get one that's sharp, you can delete all the others. Nobody's ever going to see it, and you're going to look like a genius. So really, as many of those things that you can do that I just listed there, there's more of them that you can do, the better. So all of those things put together, you're going to be able to get razor sharp images every single time. So thanks so much for that. Listen, if you have your own photo questions, don't forget to go to AskDavidBergman.com. You can ask questions there. I just might answer it on a future show. Also, I'm doing one-on-one consultations so I can help you directly with your photo problem, whether it's business or, it can be technical or creative, whatever it is, I can help you out directly over Zoom. And remember, we're almost at 1 million, so don't forget to subscribe right here on Adorama TV. Please like and comment below. I'll be in there answering questions as best I can. Remember, I'm back here every Monday, 10 a.m. Eastern, answering your photo questions right here on Ask David Bergman.